Great to see one of our own just blossom and shine and go to the edge and stretch. Thank you, Avery. So this month, our theme is about going to the edge. In other words, going to places perhaps that we've never been before, places that are a bit uncomfortable and are taking us to new territory. Next week, there's a group of us that are going to Camano Island to go on the zip line. How many are going? Raise your hand. Oh, look at all the, hey. So that's definitely an edge experience for me. So that'll be a lot of fun. So Jesus, Buddha, Muhammad, Moses, they were all people who were on the edge, each in their own way, and they each showed us a better way to live on this planet. And we're still assimilating and learning and trying to practice what it is that they brought to us. So this month we've been exploring the question, what is your edge? What is it that makes you a little bit nervous and, you know, it puts you out there a little bit? What is the edge for you? What is your area of growth? Because again, it can be scary. It may call for us to let go of an image that we may have held for ourselves. And it may call us to stretch in ways that we thought could never happen. So I have asked for stories from our community about different ways that perhaps you went to the edge, and Felix is letting me share his story because he just came back from Ohio where he participated in the gay games. And this is people from all over the world come and participate. And he had sent an email telling a little bit about his story. And one is that he wasn't ever an athletic kid. He just wasn't an athletic kid. He was a nerd, and he kind of got picked on and bullied. And it wasn't until you were in your 40s and 50s that he started to get into sports, right? Well, last year, Felix had a heart attack. And sometimes the thing that takes us to our edge is what? A health challenge, right? It's like, whoa, wait a minute. How much time have I got left here on this planet? And that heart attack, I would assume, brought him to the edge. So here's the good news, is that he just, as I said, came back from the gay games where he won the silver medal for discus, the silver medal. Can we show them your medals? And the silver medal for discus, and he didn't bring them, but he also won 2 gold medals. One for the mixed relay team in running, and for the 4 and 100 meter. Obviously, I don't know how this all works. Anyway, he won 2 gold medals, so he didn't. And needless to say, he didn't bring his gold medals with him. He brought. But one of the things that he shared with me is that it was such a celebration, and particularly to celebrate and support the Russian players who were there, because they have to go back to Russia where they're being persecuted. And so it was a way for them to know, guess what, you're not alone. You know, there are other people there's around the world that are supporting you, and yet then to come back here where we're free. Yeah, and Felix is getting married in 2 weeks. And the games will be held in Paris in 4 years, so he will be there. That sounds like a lot of fun. So this is his edge, right? These are the edges, and idea of himself had to be let go of, right? I'm a nerd. I'm not athletic. And then he goes and he wins these medals. Yeah, he went to his edge, and that's the kind of thing that happens to us when we go to our edge. So what I want to look at today is exploring the edges of consciousness. And I'm going to be leading on Teilhard de Chardin, the Jesuit priest and paleontologist. Wikipedia said that Teilhard postulates that the omega point is the supreme point of complexity and consciousness, which in his view is the actual cause for the universe to grow in complexity and consciousness. So what does that mean? It means that we are evolving, yeah? And we are evolving in greater and greater complexity and in greater consciousness. And every generation that is born takes us to a new level of complexity and consciousness. And he says, this is our birthright. This is who we are. This is why we are here. We are each here to grow and awaken into Christ consciousness. Charles Fillmore said the same exact thing. He said, the unfoldment of this consciousness by Jesus made him God incarnate, because Christ is the mind of God individualized. Whoever so loses his personality as to be swallowed up in God becomes Christ Jesus, or God man, or God woman. So we are moving in that full and complete expression of Christ consciousness. That's why we're here. We're here to grow and awaken to that. Jesus called the edge of consciousness the kingdom of heaven. And it was the same thing. He said in his parables, the kingdom of heaven is like leaven, right? And it causes the bread to grow and to expand. The kingdom of heaven is like a tiny little mustard seed. It grows into this great bush where birds come and settle. Again, we get this idea, the same as Teilhard de Chardin, the same as Charles Fillmore. Of course, we built those on Jesus' teachings, that there's this expansion in consciousness that is always happening. He also said, the kingdom of heaven is like a pearl of great price that a man buried in a field, and then he sold everything that he had so that he could get it back. That's all that mattered. And the truth is, throughout life, really what matters is love, isn't it? What matters is this consciousness, and this consciousness that is expanding, because our possessions will come and go, things will change, but that consciousness is what is constantly growing. Sometimes we have to force ourselves to the edge of an awakening consciousness. Have you ever had to have been forced to that? Because we resist waking up. And why do we resist waking up? I think Emily Cady in Lessons in Truth would say it's because we believe we are in bondage to the flesh, or we believe that this is it, right? This is the body, and we get stuck. Have you ever been stuck? You get stuck. We get stuck in our routines. We get stuck in the way things are. And many times, what happens when that happens? Doesn't the universe just sort of push us into the next experience, into the next growth in complexity and in consciousness? So we could try to keep things the same. We could try to keep things in this nice little box, but life is change, and life is about growth and expansion. So I believe that every generation that is born brings to this planet a new consciousness and a new awakening. Now, many of you know that I am an astrologer. Unity, that is not one of its teachings, but it is one of the ways that I have made sense of the universe. And I just want to share with you the definition of generations, because to me it helps explain what are the gifts that each of us is bringing. Now, for thousands of years, there were 7 known planets, right? If you count the moon as a planet, there were 7 known planets. And then in March of 1781, we had telescopes. And so we were able to look out into the sky, and lo and behold, there was another planet out there, and it was called Uranus or Uranus, depending what part of the country you're from. And one of the interesting things that happens is that the planets represent a collective archetype within us all. And when a planet is discovered, there's an awakening that happens in humanity that wasn't there before. So what happened in 1781 or around that period? Did we not have the American Revolution? Was there not, if you read history throughout Europe, there was revolutions. All of a sudden it was like, industrialization, and people wanted their rights. All of a sudden, it wasn't like the king who gets to decide everything and the priest who gets to decide everything, although that still was happening, but rather individual rights became extremely important, and it continues to grow and expand. And then, in 1846, the planet Neptune was discovered, and that symbolizes the archetype of spirituality. And what happened in the mid-1800s? The Fillmores were alive and studying. The Holmes brothers, the founders of religious science. And there was all this, all of a sudden, like, again, we don't need to go to the priest. It's like the song that you sang, that everything is holy. We don't need to, it's great to be in spiritual community. I love when we're all together in spiritual community. Magic happens, but the whole world is holy. And we all have access to spirit. We all have access to God. And that's an awakening that didn't really occur to the degree that it did. The Eastern teachings started to come in. And then in 1930, Pluto, who's no longer a planet, but Pluto was discovered. Poor Pluto. And what happens with Pluto is there's this understanding of the underworld, if you will, of the deep subconscious. And we never even heard that word before, right? But who was around then was Freud and Jung, and they introduced us to this whole way of being. So one of the things that I have noticed is that each generation brings in a new awakening to this planet that the other generations then build on. So, one of the ways that astrologers define a generation is by what sign Pluto is in. And in 1914 to 39, Pluto was in Cancer. And it's not all the World War II generation, but quite a bit of the World War II generation. And what did they bring us? The gift they brought us was social security. Cancer is about security and the family. And they brought us the nuclear family and home, that was really important. And then came the boomers. Oh, they're so loud. The boomers came along in around, and again, this is a little rough, but it's like 1939 to 58. And the boomers, this is in Leo, and they've done everything loudly, haven't they? It's like they're the first ones to ever get married and have or just have a relationship. They're the first ones to have kids. They're the first ones to go through menopause, and now we're getting ready to die, right? And it's like the planet's gonna be so much quieter when the boomers are gone. But what the boomers have done is they brought all this stuff that was hidden in the closet, and they brought it out so we could see it. And they did it dramatically so that we could experience it. And so things that were hidden and not talked about are now talked about. The generation from 56 to 72, they were the ones who brought us the idea of taking care of the earth. And it's not that none of the other generations did, but this is something that they care deeply about, is what about recycling? Earth Day was formed during this period. And it's like, what about natural healing? How about that? And that began to expand and grow. And then the generation from 71 to 84, which is Libra, they brought us and are fully grounded in relationships, one-on-one relationships. And what they brought us is all relationships are okay. Not okay, that is the way it's supposed to be, right? You get married, you don't get married. You're the same sex, you're not the same sex. You're the same color, you're not the same color. Who cares, right? They have brought us that, and they live that. And once a generation comes in and starts living it, the rest of us kind of go, okay, that sounds like a good idea. Let's do that too, right? We join in with them because they're expanding in greater consciousness and complexity. They also do a lot of body art. It's Libra, it's artistic. 83 to 95, that's my children are in this period. And they're mostly Harry Potter's age, so they have this understanding of how the world works. And there's this way that they communicate, and it's mostly through social media, but they just know things. Now, we had a sad event this week where one of my kids' friends had died, and Kelly found it in the obituary because he's taken to reading the Seattle paper because he says, you find things out about Seattle that you don't find out when you're just on the internet. So I called Caroline and told her, or texted her, and she goes, how do you find these things? I go, it's called an obituary. It's in the newspaper, She'd never heard of it. And And I said, well, are your other friends coming? Well, one of them is. I don't think anybody knows about it. I'm like, why? Because it was in the newspaper? But she said, our generation, we just know. She didn't know how she didn't know. It was, of course, packed. But everybody learned through their texting and their Snapchat and their Facebook and their who knows what else. But it's like they have this instant knowledge. It's almost like they're psychic. They get this instant knowledge available to them. And I think the generation that's like 95 to 2008, I think they're the ones that are going to come to us and say, you know what? All of this one religion business, forget about it. All religions are the same. They have elemental truths. So I think that they're going to actually live that. We're moving in that direction, and we see that that's the way to go, but they actually live it. Gibran said that you are the bows from which your children, as living arrows, are sent forth. Right? And everything that you have done, everything that, whether you do it alone or with your generation, everything that you have learned, you are the bow from which your children, as living arrows, can go forth and expand in consciousness, because again, that's why we are here. Yes. So, there are different ways that we can go to the edges of consciousness. Buddha and Jesus were master teachers in showing us how to do that. We know that through prayer and meditation, we can go to the edges of consciousness. But how many of you have used drugs to go to the edge of consciousness? I'm just talking coffee. Just coffee, right? It wakes you up, or alcohol to relax you. But, and the other ones, how many of you had an awakening through other things? Shamans and Native Americans use plants, right? Peyote and those kinds of things to go to the edges of consciousness. What about fasting? We have all these different techniques that we use to go to edges of consciousness. Kelly has recently read an article about fasting for 3 days will automatically reset your immune system. So I thought, well, what the heck, I'll try it, So I didn't eat for 3 days. And it was interesting because I was sort of detached in a way of just sort of observing the world. It wasn't good, wasn't bad, it was just different, but it's a way to go to the edge of consciousness. Everyday life gives us an opportunity to go to the edge of consciousness. I was listening to This American Life. I believe it's on NPR. I was with Richard and Maureen this week, and we were listening to that. And there was a piece about living with Alzheimer's. And this couple and their daughter moved to North Carolina from Milwaukee to be with their mom who has Alzheimer's. And of course, it's very difficult. Anybody who has a relative who has Alzheimer's, it's very difficult. And so her daughter was going crazy because she had to tell her who she was, tell her that she can't remember anything. And she would argue with her. And her mother was getting really mean. So she Googled Alzheimer's and what to do. And she found an interesting article that said, step into their world. Step in to your loved one's world who has Alzheimer's. And she thought, wow, I can do that, because she and her husband were actors and they did improv theater. And when you do improv theater, what do? You step into the other person's world and you say, yes and, yes and, yes and. So they decided to try that. Instead of arguing with her, they were going to step into her world. Now, her husband had an easier time because he didn't have a past with her, but I just want to share with you one of the descriptions that happened with them. So the mom, Virginia, is looking out the window and she says, there's some monkeys in the yard. Now, rather than say, no, there aren't any monkeys in North Carolina, there's no monkeys in the yard, her son-in-law said, well, it's pretty early in the season for monkeys, don't you think? I didn't even know they were in North Carolina. And she says, oh, no, there's a lot of them, but they're pretty busy right now. And he said, well, if you see one, we should try to capture it, and we should bring it in the house because it would be so much fun to have monkeys in the house. And she says, you can't keep monkeys in the house. And he says, well, yeah, you have to train them and you have to put pants on them because a monkey without pants is just a barbarian monkey. And she says, we can't have monkeys in the house. And he says, well, all right, I guess you're making up a rule that we can't have monkeys in the house. And she says, yes, that's right, I am. And every day is like this, where whatever she says, rather than arguing with her and saying no, he says yes, and he builds and expands, and the thing is that Virginia has fallen in love with her son-in-law. And not only that, but she's created memories from her childhood and she's inserted him into her past. Now, it's not so easy for her daughter, because her daughter has all these memories with her mom, and her mom doesn't know who she is. And at one point, she was really frustrated, and she said, you are not my daughter. And she said, well, then who do you think I am anyway? And she said, I don't know, you're just some person who was out on the street, and I was kind enough to bring you in. And her daughter said, thank you very much for doing that. Thank you for bringing me into your home. Chana Joffe said, in a moment like that, the rules, her name is Karen, that Karen has set up require that she deny who she is. That she is Karen, that she is daughter of Virginia, that she is mother of Grace, who grew up in Texas. If she wants to do her plan right, she can't be the person in her own home. Starting each moment with a blank slate is easy for her husband. It's fun to create a world out of nothing with this person as he gets to know her better, but for Karen, every interaction asks her to erase who she is. Is that not a way to go to the edge of consciousness? Because don't we have to do that eventually anyway? We have to let go of who we are totally and completely. So what she has done, Karen has written a book, and she has a website that's called In This Moment. Because what she's discovered is that all of the techniques and the things that she needs in improv are exactly the techniques that she needs in dealing with her mother. So going to the edge requires flexibility and moving beyond the places where we may be stuck. And again, going to one service is going to the edge. It means change for us as a community. And again, I came to work this week and the building was gone across the street. It's like, whoa, what happened? It's all over. Going to the edge is uncomfortable because we prefer to be in the middle. But Teilhard de Chardin believed that it is our birthright to awaken to the Christ consciousness. Absolutely. Jesus described it as the kingdom of God. It's like leaven, it's like mustard seed, it's like the pearl of great price. And this is where we are headed. Teilhard de Chardin. The day will come when, after harnessing space, the winds, the tides, and gravitation, bless you, we shall harness for God the energies of love. And on that day, for the second time in the history of the world, we will have discovered fire. Wow. May I get an amen?